Welcome once again to Talking Point, and today we have our little pre-winter segment. I have with me firefighter paramedic Karpinski and firefighter paramedic extraordinaire Parker. I don't know if that's an official title, but that's how I was asked to introduce him. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming. What I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about, winter season's coming up. People have, extra heaters going on and things like that. I want to talk about some of the things that we can make the public aware of regarding winter safety from the firefighter paramedic standpoint. So why don't you tell me a little bit about some of the things that citizens can do or should be aware of regarding winter safety?
Sure. I'll start with CO alarms, which we have here today with us.
CO.
An example, carbon monoxide.
Thank you.
Which is a gas, big causes of it are natural gas in the home when it doesn't burn correctly through items such as a hot water heater, gas stoves, and it doesn't burn correctly, it gives off this carbon monoxide.
Okay.
This gas, as a lot of people know, can be deadly. It's odorless, it's colorless, so the only real way to tell that it's there is by having a proper CO alarm. One of them, like I have here, some come as just a carbon monoxide alarm only. Others are a combination of smoke and carbon monoxide. They all work really well. The recommendation is to have one on every floor, plus one in every sleeping area.
Okay.
There's an old myth that carbon monoxide is heavier than air, which has actually been proven false, and it's actually slightly lighter. However, it's so close that the belief or the studies have shown that it circulates through the entire room. So the best recommendation we have as far as height to install them is to actually look at the manufacturer's directions, and they always give a variance or an area that they feel it's best to install it and follow that direction. The other couple things, we always recommend testing them once a month to make sure that they're working. Sometimes, even if they have the outlet plug-in as we have here, they still have a spare battery in there that we want to make sure is working in case we lose power.
Right.
In addition to that, when it is sounding, there's always often a confusion. If it's one chirp, if it's multiple chirps, if it's loud, is it quiet? When do we know if it's the battery that's bad or is it actually alarming? That's another one. Unfortunately, every brand has a different method or theory that they use, or what one chirp means and what three chirps means. So we always recommend, again, looking at your manufacturer's directions. Of course, if you can read them when you install them right away, so that you hopefully have a good idea as soon as it's going off, if we need to be worrying about it being a battery or if we should be worried it's CO. Other things, if it is going off and if you think it's the battery, we recommend changing the battery and seeing if it continues to go off. If it doesn't, then either the CO was never there or it was just the battery.
Okay.
If it continues to go off, then we recommend getting out of the house. We always recommend to keep the windows closed. That way, if there is CO, when the fire department gets there, it's easier for us to check and find that there is CO. Unfortunately, when the windows get opened up, it airs everything out. Mm-hmm. And with our meters, it's hard to detect that if there really was CO or not. So we end up having to close everything up, and it just takes a little longer to find out. If we can find it sooner, we can get WPS or whatever service covers that area to the house or residence, building, wherever.
Well, and that's important to know, too. You want the windows closed if the CO detector goes off, but if someone smells natural gas, you want to open those windows right away, right?
I would still keep them closed.
Really?
Well, because then we can check and, otherwise you're airing that natural gas out again. That way we can still have high concentration and find it.
My first instinct would be open the windows, ventilate the place, because if it's natural gas, a spark can set that thing off and it could be a lot worse. But you're saying keep the windows closed, call 911, get out of the house, go to a neighbor's house.
Correct.
And wait for you to arrive to do an actual test. Okay.
Couple other things on that real quick. I wanted to mention some of the signs and symptoms of CO poisoning: nausea, dizziness, lightheadedness. In those instances, if you hear a chirp, an alarm, and you're unsure if it's the battery or not, and you're having those symptoms, don't worry about checking your battery. I recommend get out right away. because chances are there is CO, and we don't want you staying in that residence longer, possibly passing out. As I mentioned before, carbon monoxide can be fatal. We wouldn't want you to be unconscious and not be able to call, or worse, even worse, have death happen because you didn't get out, maybe in that couple extra seconds or couple minutes it took you to check the battery. So,
sure. I know that some of the smoke detectors have 10-year batteries. You can buy units now that you don't need to be checking the battery every spring and fall, but you should still test the unit. Do carbon monoxide detectors come with those same long-term batteries?
Not the long-term batteries that I know of. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we always recommend testing it every month, and we still recommend with even a fire alarm or smoke detector to change them out with a daylight savings time, twice a year still.
Okay, changing them out. So if someone is unsure which unit to buy, because I know there's a lot of units out there, what are some of the things that the consumers can look for when they're either shopping locally, which I hope they do, or looking for a carbon monoxide and or a smoke detector fire alarm?
Looking around, seeing what's out there. They're all real good products that they sell at a lot of local retailers. You can, of course, online getting reviews. Yep. I personally feel that you pay for what you get, so I wouldn't go too cheap. Right. A lot of them average around that same price, and I would do a little research before you look if you're concerned about them, but I think they're all good products out there.
Okay, good. Mr. Parker, why don't we talk about the space heaters and some things that people use to supplement their heat in their home that are less than safe.
Exactly. So obviously it's getting into the winter season, and to supplement the home to heat, people go to space heaters or other heating-like appliances. When looking at these, they aren't the worst thing in the world. You can use them. They are safe. When you use them with the right precautions.
And that's what we need to talk about.
Exactly. So a lot of the manufacturers out there, we have a couple different testing laboratories out there that go through and look at the space heaters that are on the market. Mm-hmm. And when they do, there are two specific laboratories that do that, the UL, the Underwriters Laboratories, and the NIST. And these are labeled and put on the products that are sold at the local stores. And those are things to kind of look for right out of the gate. When you're looking to find a space heater for supplemental heat, that is what you want to look for. Those are trusted laboratories that do extensive testing on those products that make me feel comfortable as a firefighter, but then also as a husband and a father to allow that product in the home. Some other simple things that you can look for with space heaters in the home, just to minor maintenance, checking the cords, make sure there's no fraying, nothing broken, and then other simple things to do. Keep away from combustibles. Some simple things, your carpet. Laying a space heater on carpet, that's a no-go. Putting it on furniture or close to chairs, draperies,
storing your newspapers next to it.
Exactly.
Those are all bad ideas. Right?
Anything that is combustible, cardboard, I could list off a ton more things, but that's a big one. We see about 65,000 homes a year in the United States have a house fire or a room and contents fire due to space heaters and people not properly using them. And this can lead, death, serious injury, and it causes millions of dollars of property damage. And so just taking those few extra steps to, extra seconds to make sure that those space heaters are placed in proper places, making sure the product is still in good working condition and use, are great starts. Some
of the other things that I think people need to be aware of is sometimes they use extension cords when they're running their heaters. You want to make sure you use a properly rated extension cord. Check the cord periodically. If it gets warm, you're probably not using the right cord.
Correct.
There's probably a defect in the product, or you're not using the right cord. I know a lot of people also will turn on their ovens and open the door as supplemental heat. It's probably not the worst thing you can do, but it also increases your risk, especially with the carbon monoxide.
Right. Carbon monoxide, and it creates more of an open heat source where things can get in there, brush, fall, whatever. With the extension cords and outlet strips and so forth. Most manufacturers actually say don't do that. Just stay away from that period. They actually recommend plugging directly into an outlet. And then the other thing that I actually learned today for myself, doing a little research on this stuff, was most manufacturers, and even the UL and the NIST, like I talked before, they say don't plug in any other appliances to that specific outlet that you have the heater plugged into. Which for me, I didn't know that. Learned something new every. Right, and I think it's more or less because of the amount of draw of electricity.
Right. Electric heat is very expensive. Uses a lot of electricity.
Exactly, and we don't think about that as homeowners or residents. It's not the first thing that comes to mind. I'm not an electrician or anything, so it doesn't click with me. So just a few things to kind of think about when using space heaters.
Good. We've got a couple minutes left. Talk about some of the other things that you as paramedics run into. I'm not exactly the most physically fit person in the world, but I'm going to have to go out and shovel heavy snow. What should people be aware of when doing those things and chores in winter?
I think when we talk about winter and snow shoveling, of course, the first thing that comes up is always back injuries. Making sure, especially with those heavy, wet snows, that you're getting underneath it, you're using your legs, not your back.
Okay.
Taking smaller fulls. I know it takes longer, unfortunately. And maybe if it's a heavy snow, a neighbor can help out with a snow blower. That's obviously the easiest, best way. You're not doing the lifting then. But like I said, if you have to do the lifting, taking smaller shovelfuls, especially in those heavy, wet snows where it's that much heavier, and taking your time while you're doing it. Go ahead.
I was just going to add how slippery it can get out there after you've cleared away areas. And I'm sure multiple people have taken that little slip and then just tried to quickly catch themselves and it pulls their back just a little bit. Just making sure that there's enough, whether you use salt or sand or gravel or whatever it is, to make those areas easier to walk on, more safe. That would probably be another thing that I think about when it comes to winter.
I know you guys get occasionally calls. People get bundled up. They're not used to doing a lot of heavy exercise. They get bundled up, they get outside, and they start pulling shovels full of big snow, and maybe they start experiencing chest pains.
Yes.
How can we avoid that?
Well, again, taking it a little easier, calmer. The more your body's getting worked up, your higher blood pressure, your heart rate's racing, those types of things can cause chest pain. However, sometimes it's unavoidable. If you have chest pain, call 911 right away. Of course, we all know about the heart attack and worrying about chest pain because of that, but it can be many other cardiac-related issues too that going to your cardiologist could maybe get solved a lot easier, so that you don't have that chest pain in the future.
Okay, well, I'm certainly glad we have two paramedics when we call 911 that show up to my door if something should happen to me.
Absolutely.
So thank you both very much for your service. The one last thing I want to touch on is every year when I drive by the fire station, I see this wreath. Tell me about the wreath.
So the wreath is placed out for about a month long. And what it represents is a lot of us put up Christmas trees or extra ornaments, holiday lights, candles, the different things like that, just to create that holiday spirit.
Right.
And in those times, fires can take place or unfortunately take place. And the goal, the wreath has certain colors on there that we start out with. And the goal is to keep those certain colors there the entire month.
Right.
If there is, unfortunately, an event where there is a fire or something that takes place where the fire department has to be called, we do change out those lights to symbolize an accident that has taken place.
Okay.
And so just to allow you guys to be aware, and the city and the residents here to be aware of what's going on, like I said, take that extra second just to be a little extra cautious with Christmas trees, making sure they're watered, how you're placing those lights, those candles, and having a little one as well, knowing where to place those candles out of reach and so forth. So that's the
So
whole
I think
story
the lights are normally green.
Yes.
You set up the green lights.
Yep.
And if there is a structure fire or worse, an injury, you change them out to red and white with that significance. So the point is we want to try and keep our wreaths green.
Yes.
So taking all of those safety tips that you've just offered us in mind, using a little common sense, and when you drive by the fire station, hope that all of those lights are green. If you see a different color on there, know that something happened, and we need to be extra cautious, especially during winter. Thank you both, gentlemen, very much for joining us on this episode of Talking Point. Hopefully we'll have another safe winter season. And for those of you watching and listening at home, I'm Mayor Mike, and we've been Talking Point. In this special segment of Talking Point, I have Officer Chris Marshall with us, and we're going to talk a little bit about things that you can do to prepare for winter driving and some of the challenges that the police department faces with winter. As you know, the snow is going to be flying any day now, so we're going to get that information out there to help you help us. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about some of the challenges. I know, winter rolls around. You guys have difficulties, driving your vehicles. A lot of vehicle operators have challenges in the winter. It seems that people forget how to drive, even though it happens every 9 months or so.
Right.
They forget to drive. So talk about some of the things that you think people need to be aware of or prepare for this upcoming winter season.
Well, I kind of put it into two categories. The first being things you can do before you even set foot in the vehicle. One, try to park your vehicle in a garage if you can. That's not available for everybody, but if you can't park in a garage and you have to park outside, get up ahead of time and start your vehicle up so it can run, 10, 15 minutes and, de-ice the window, and, you can have time to get the snow and ice off it. Things like, maintenance-wise too for winter. Making sure your tires are in good shape. The roads are slippery enough and snowy enough that it's hard to get grip. But if you have bad tires and bald tires, that's going to make it even harder.
My wife's getting new ones on Saturday.
And a lot of the
winter.
businesses in town run specials, in the fall before the snow even falls. So, that's definitely one thing to make sure you do. But another thing is just planning and preparation. We live here in Wisconsin. We know you could go to bed and it could be, 35, 40 degrees. You could wake up in the morning and there could be 8 to 10 inches of snow on the ground, and slippery roads. So this, plan ahead, try to leave 10 to 15 minutes ahead of time before you go somewhere, plan a route that, is a safer route if you can. And then you have things you can do while you're driving. Some people may or may not know in the last year they enacted a new law where basically if there's inclement weather, be it rain, fog, snow, basically if you have to have your windshield wipers on, you have to have your headlights on.
Okay.
And that's for safety. It's so people can see you. You take rainy, snowy, sleety weather, look out your window, your side window at your rear or your side mirrors, and you really can't see much. So if somebody's coming up alongside you and they don't have their lights on, it's pretty hard to see them. So make sure you have your lights on. Going back to the planning ahead of time, give yourself time. If you have to be somewhere by 5 o'clock, don't give yourself 5 minutes to get there. Leave ahead of time. Most accidents can be prevented. Slow down ahead of time. If there's a stop and go light up ahead or a stop sign, give yourself ample time to slow down. Don't wait until the last second. Some of the same things that affect, non-winter driving. Inattentive driving or distracted driving. Don't be on your cell phones or texting, changing the radio station. You got to pay attention, because now, if you're not paying attention and somebody stops in front of you, you have even less time to react. So just being more attentive in your driving, slowing down, take the road conditions, into, the thought process of driving. I mean, it may be a 35 mile per hour zone that you're driving in, but if there's 4 inches of snow on the ground and it's slippery,
you shouldn't be driving.
You shouldn't be doing 35 miles per hour.
Right. Some of the things that I notice, people don't necessarily do a thorough job of clearing their windshield. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you even get fog on the inside of your windshield, a little frost on the inside of your windshield. Make sure your windshields are clear before you leave.
Exactly.
For wherever you're going. Don't have that little spot that the defroster happened to get out and you have to, duck and cover to see out your window. Make sure it's clear and that you get good visibility, especially on the sides, so you see if a pedestrian or a bicyclist coming or another vehicle. Make sure that your rear window is clear so you can see out the back window through your rear view mirror. Do as much of that as you can before you leave your driveway or your parking lot if you're leaving from work. That's a big help. Right. Make sure your headlights are clear from snow. Sometimes the snow builds up on your bumper or your tail lights, so the people behind you could see your brake lights. Remember that four-wheel drive may help you to get going in the snow, but it does absolutely nothing for stopping. And that's something that that I think people tend to forget is I've got four-wheel drive, so I can go fast.
Right.
Don't do that.
No, you know, and a lot of trucks will have, you know, off-road tires or mud tires. You know, I know I have some more aggressive tread tires on my truck, but you know, in snow and ice, those are actually, you know, worse. You know, they react to the slippery road conditions worse than regular street tires. But you know, and a lot of people aren't aware you can actually be pulled over for driving around with your windows full of you know, frost or snow. I mean, your tail lights, your headlights all have to be clear. All your windows need to be clear. If we see you driving down the road with a little, you know, pie plate window that you're looking through, you're going to get pulled over and you could be fined.
What can I put in my car as kind of a winter preparedness kit?
Well, you know, blankets for one. You know, blankets. You know, water is kind of a iffy thing because, you know, depending on the time of winter, it could freeze. You know, you store water in your car and it's 10 degrees outside, it's probably going to freeze on you and could crack. But definitely blankets. You know, it comes down to planning. Make sure your cell phone is charged, or you know, that you bring a cell phone. You know, in here in the city of Stevens Point, anywhere you'd break down, you're pretty much within walking distance of somebody or somewhere, you know, that can get you assistance. And we live in a great community where if you need help, somebody's going to help you and make a call for you, at least, if not give you a ride somewhere. So
yeah, and in the city that helps. With some of us are city residents who may leave the city. Things I put in sand or kitty litter, something to throw under the tires for traction, a smaller shovel to maybe dig out, because sometimes if you hit a snowbank, your wheels may not even be touching the ground enough, so you have to shovel out under the frame just to get some traction in there. Road flares or signal flares are not a bad idea, or some sort of LED beacon, because if you get stranded on the side of the road and it's a dark country road a few miles out of town, you need something to be able to alert other drivers that you're there.
Right.
So flares would help. The reflective triangles help. The flashing LED lights that you can get, those all help. Throw them in the trunk. Jumper cables are another big one. Have a set of good jumper cables, not these $10 low gauge wire, 16 gauge wire jumper cables. Get some good heavy duty jumper cables, and long. So if you need a jump, you have them. If someone needs a jump, you can help them. And you can't do it if you don't have the right equipment.
Good
and
points.
then some basic tools, I think, you know, hammer, pliers, vice grips, one of each, screwdriver, a Phillips head, and a flathead, those sorts of things. But what you were talking about with the cell phone, that's going to be your number one lifeline. So make sure your cell phones are charged. If you need to call for help, you can do that. And always be aware of other drivers too, because it may not be you that is having the issue or causing the accident. Maybe that person can't stop and it's coming up on a stop sign. And even though you have the right of way, it looks like they're going to slide through. So do your best to avoid the accidents too.
Exactly. You know, something that comes up thinking from last year too, especially when we get heavy snowfalls during the day while most people are out to work or to school. You know, try to arrange for someone to shovel your driveway so you can get in. You know, our city streets do an amazing job at clearing the streets, but what that means a lot of time is, you know, a large buildup of snow for driveways. I can't remember how many cars we had to push out of snowbanks last year when we would get heavy snowfalls that try to go in a driveway and they can't make it because it wasn't shoveled out, and then they're stuck there half hanging out in traffic, which then that's a traffic hazard.
Right.
So, you know, definitely trying to arrange, whether it's, you know, shoveling before you go to work or, you know, calling a neighbor up or something like that. Somehow try to arrange where you can get into your driveway if you know it's going to be.
Yeah, especially the smaller vehicles. You know, you and I have pickups. My wife has a small Jetta. I can get through a lot more stuff than she can. So we need to park on the street, shovel out a path so you can get into the driveway when you get home, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about parking and snow emergency and the way you do enforcement. We do snow emergencies, and I said before that the emergency portion of it is the word that they use in the state statute. I have to declare an emergency to put in those parking restrictions. And we only do that in the most severe cases to allow our drivers to clear the roads. But parking in general, what are some of the things that people can remember when they're parking on the street in winter, or even parking in a parking lot?
Well, just plan ahead. Plan ahead, and sometimes it's going to mean a little further walk. You know, it's winter. I mean, that's parking gets to be a large issue, like I said, with the, you know, getting in and out of driveways, and, you know, the snow builds up on the roads and kind of narrows the roads. So, you know, use a little common sense as well when it comes to parking. I know sometimes parking can be an issue, but just because a roadway has parking on both sides of the road, and we get into February, late February,
Those
and
roads
the road,
get pretty narrow.
yeah, the road is narrowed, 4 feet, 5 feet on each side. Just because you can park somewhere doesn't mean you should park somewhere. It could lead to, us having to call you and/or eventually towing the vehicle. If it's clogging up the roadway, I just can't stay there.
Right. Good. Good. Some of the other things that I think we can touch on are maybe some of the violations that you see occur more frequently in the winter. Speeding, as you said before, if it's 25 mile an hour speed limit, you're legally able to go 20 or allowed to go 25. However, driving too fast for conditions is also a violation.
Right.
So talk about some of the common violations that you see that happen more frequently in the winter months.
No, with winter driving and the weather, we run into, a way higher number of accidents, and a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are preventable. If people would just slow down, as the snow builds up, visibility decreases as people are backing out of their driveways. The snow is piled up 5-6 feet high, and their door level is 3 foot high, and they just can't see. So they back out, and sometimes they have to back out too far, and next thing you know, they're backing into somebody. So, there's unsafe backing people are sometimes ticketed for. Too fast for conditions, like you mentioned. Just because you can do 35 miles an hour legally on a road doesn't mean you should if they're ice and slush covered. Following too closely, you could be cited for that if you end up rear-ending somebody. Or even there's kind of what's basically called failure to maintain control of your vehicle, and we use common sense, if there's an accident, and I arrive on scene and I roll up slow and I'm doing 5-10 miles per hour and my squad car can't even stop, or I get out and I'm almost falling down, we're going to take that into consideration. But, you get in an accident because you're going too fast for conditions, to make your day even worse, you're probably going to get a ticket out of it, It's going to just compound things. So slow down, give yourself more time to get to places you need to go.
Good. One of the things that I wanted to mention, I know it's not police department enforceable, but corners, sometimes those snowbanks get pretty high in the winter. And you want to make sure as a property owner that you are allowing what we call the vision triangle. So when someone pulls up at an intersection, they can look to the left and look to the right and see above your snowbanks. So if
Right.
you're creating a snowbank that's 4 feet tall or 3 feet tall and a driver can't see what's coming, you need to be a responsible property owner. Knock that snowbank down, move that snow into your yard, because we will have our inspections department come and they will remind you that you have an obligation to do that. We'd prefer that you just do it because you know it's a problem. But that becomes a real issue too, is those snowbanks not being able to see if traffic's coming, or bicyclists, or even pedestrians in some cases.
Right. There's people that bike all year round in our community.
Middle of winter, you're going to have kids that are shorter than snowbanks.
Right. A lot of kids
you're not
walk
going
to
to be able to
school.
see. Right.
You bet.
So be very, very careful with that. And then the one thing I wanted to leave you with, and I know you and everyone else in the police force feel the same way, is when you're driving in winter, minimize your distractions. Shut your phone off. There is nothing on that phone that is worth risking your life or someone else's life for. Even more so in the winter with those hazardous conditions.
Yeah.
Leave the phone off till you get to your destination.
Yep. Your reaction time, is lessened because of the slippery roads. So.
Yeah, we don't have an ordinance in the city prohibiting that.
Right.
But common sense tells you that minimize those distractions. Put the phone down. Let it ring. It'll go to voicemail. You can answer it when you get to your destination. Nothing is that important. We lived plenty of years without cell phones. We don't need to answer that phone right away. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this little segment up?
No, just to point out again, just to slow things down. So many accidents are preventable in the things that we can do ahead of time or as we're driving. So just plan ahead. It's winter, the winter months, the bad roads are coming. Our streets department does an amazing job of cleaning them up, but it's nature. They can plow a street and 20 minutes later it's going to be icy and slick again. So use common sense, plan ahead, and just slow down.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
We've been with Officer Marshall from the Stevens Point Police Department, reminding us of some of the things that we need to be aware of as we approach the winter season. Until next time, I'm Mayor Mike, and we've been talking Point.